Cloud. Here we go. All right, welcome everyone to the Making Sense of Three-Dimensional Teaching and Learning workshop. And prior to the recording, I introduced Trish Shelton, and I'm Kate Soriano, and we are thrilled to be with you today. I just want to share a couple of nuts and bolts about using Zoom. The most important parts of Zoom today that we're going to be using is the chat window. That is really important that everybody finds that toolbar either across the top of their screen or the bottom of their screen and open up that chat window and be ready to jump right in. If you are interested to see who's with us today, you can open it'll say for you participants. And when you open that window, your name will appear at the top of the participant list and you can see who else is with us today. When you are adjusting, you're having difficulty hearing what people are saying, that's the little up arrow next to the microphone. The cameras we'll use in breakout groups, but we'll keep the cameras off when we're in whole group to make sure that no matter what your screen size, you have a good opportunity to see the information that is presented there. If you're on a phone, the one downside, the upside, you're mobile. The downside is every time you open the chat window, it covers the Zoom screen. So to be an active participant, you will need to open your chat, close the chat back and forth, but it's easy to do so. Just look for those three dots in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And if you click on that, you'll find the button to push to open the chat window. All right, it looks like, again, we have a lot of experienced Zoom users in the room and people have labeled themselves with the name that they would like to be called as we work together as a learning community today. If that name is not the name that you would wish to be addressed by, please go ahead and rename yourself. You'll find yourself again at the top of the list in the participant window. When you hover over your name, you'll have the option to rename yourself. And then click OK. And then finally, we have built for you a collection of resources that we use to support the learning inside today's workshop and then beyond today's workshop. And you will have unlimited forever access to the collection of resources. And when you need to be in there, we'll drop the link again and we'll let you know which resource to find. Even in virtual community, which we've all been in and out of many times in the past 18 months, we want to take a moment to think about our community norms. I've taken this norm from the Open Syed Classroom norms. I've put the entire list of and supporting ideas of those norms in the collection. But just remember that today, no matter where we're starting from, we are working toward a common goal. How do we create opportunities for sense making in our science classrooms? Please do share your thinking. You never know, something that gets said might be the pin that puts all the pieces together, that holds all the pieces together today for someone else. And so please do share all your ideas and do listen to and read in the chat window ideas being shared, and please do ask questions to help everyone move their learning forward. All right, so let's see if you were able to find the chat window this morning. So if your chat is open on a scale of sheep, how are you feeling this morning? So please share your sheep number in the chat window. And if you're up to it, let us know why you've chosen that particular sheep number. All right, and Trisha's starting us off with a number, so excited to be here. I think I'm more of a 4 this morning, only because I was struggling with technology in the minutes before you all joined, but I think I'm already moving toward a 9. So we've got some 9s. Yeah, so Mike is feeling a little bit like, oh, you're on day 10 of training. And Amanda's just in a goofy mood, and we'll capitalize on that. And that 3 technology issues. Yes, internet connection, only when you really critically need it is our connections the worst. Yeah, since Celeste is thinking, oh, day 147 in front of my computer. But how wonderful, as long as you're in front of the computer, how wonderful to get to spend it together in this community. And so we do have, yeah, quite a few 7s. Oh, and Rhonda, well, you're amazing that you were able to make adjustments in 10 minutes and join us on time this morning. So thank you so much. Anybody out there who's a crock pot and still thinking about your sheep number, no worries. You can continue to post it for the next 5, 10, or even few hours. So please do share. Ashley, I hope you are recovering well. All right, with that, Trish, I'm gonna turn things over to you. And I bet you'd like to be able to move the slides.
Thank you so much, Kate. Welcome everybody again. I'm really excited to be here. I'm a 9. So hopefully my excitement won't get in the way of what your goals are for this learning today. But I do want to outline what my approach to our session today was a balance between providing a vision, one of the visions that implementing the new Colorado standards, what it does in the classroom and what it can do long-term for kids and for you as a leader of learning in the classroom in your school, and then also short-term things that you can think about and use immediately. And so that's what NSTA means by making sense of 3-dimensional teaching and learning, kind of balance between the overall destination or a vision of that and here and now where we're starting out. And so this slide here is to really ground us in our why, that we're embarking on this journey together. And if I think back to the last year, you know, I say to myself that now more than ever, I see how essential scientific literacy is to understand and navigate our world. And looking back over the last year and all of our discussions in science ed and throughout the whole of society, we have great concern over observations that a lot of the students pictured here on this slide, and in particular, students of disabilities, students of color, immigrants, multilingual learners, and those from under-resourced communities have been disproportionately affected by both the pandemic and the disruption to the educational system that it's caused. So this access to science literacy for all, it's the umbrella of the work that we do here at NSTA, and it's the center of this research-based vision in the new Colorado science standards. Kate, if you could go ahead and advance the slide. So this focus on all that we're gonna say, our language to say this focus on equity in this new research and in the new standards in Colorado can be summarized as providing opportunities for kids to make sense of their world. A recent paper published about this topic argued that sense-making was the process of building an explanation to resolve a perceived gap or conflict in knowledge. But what does that really mean? What does that look like in our classrooms? If we are tasked with enacting the new Colorado science standards, what does that mean for your classroom? And instead of us embarking on giving you that answer in the spirit of sense making, we would like us to collaboratively build a response to the question, what is sense making? And so here's how we're going to do that together. First of all, we are going to visit an elementary classroom where I'm going to share with you that these students are sense making. And we're gonna see about, you see there the timestamp, 2 minutes of this 3rd grade classroom from the Bronx in New York. And I know that we have a mixed audience today, but I'd love for everyone to consider that if these 3rd grade students can sense make, then certainly kids in upper elementary, middle school, and high school can too. And I can attest that the observable attributes that you're going to see in this classroom are very similar to the ones that we experience in the other grade bands. They just get more sophisticated as we move from K2 to 3, 5, 6, 8, and finally 9, 12. So here's the task for you. We're going to start in what we call the alone zone, where we give each other that space to really think in our own heads in preparation for having the confidence to share publicly with a larger group. You're going to hear me use that term a lot today, and it's really, really important to that equitable participation piece that is important to Sensemaking. And so I would love if we could all honor that independent quiet work, even when it comes to what we share or don't share in the chat. So no, we're not going to share in the chat. We're just going to record our own thoughts. We're also going to ask that we encourage you and ask that you write down as many examples of what we're going to record in the alone zone so that you have a rich opportunity to share. And what we're going to be asking you to share is in this video, if you would record, what are the students doing and what is the teacher doing? And there's actually 2 adults in this video, so you can count them both as the teacher role and write down as many things as you can. And then after this, we're going to go to breakout rooms where we're going to give you some prompts for a discussion that you're going to have, that what will come out of it is what this group says is Sensemaking based on what we observe when we visit this classroom. So Kate, I would love if you would share the video clip with us, and I'll see you back in a second.
Everyone has their bean, right? Yes. Okay, cool. Today we're going to focus on our claim, which is our answer to our question. So what is our focus question for today? Emma?
What do kidney beans need to successfully germinate?
What I wanted the students to do was to define the word germinate so that we could build from one small concept up to understanding a full question. Think about our investigations and how that can push you to get a really good definition of the word germinate. Go ahead.
I think germinate is another way to say grow or sprout. I think it means to grow a couple of roots and a stem so that it could at least pop out of the surface it's in a little bit. My bean, I think it germinated and it also changed color.
So do you think that changing color was part of the germinating? So explain how it changed color though. How did it start out?
It started out as...
It's hard, I think, when you first start to teach this way to not immediately correct them. Because I think it's important for them to come to it themselves and for students to kind of encourage each other.
Mine has a lot of sunlight because it's in the bookshelf. That's why it's so green. And look at tenants, it's so yellow. And look at me. My leaves are red. Yeah, look at my roots. Germination means to change the color and grow. Sprout and grow myself. Yeah. I think life cycle.
There was some confusion.
No, not the life cycle.
They were just going from germination straight to the whole life cycle of the bean, which for me was frustrating, but to Kimber, it was something great to work from.
What do you think? To keep the life cycle going. No.
When you're asking students to actually write out what they've learned and then connect that to evidence, it's a process that I think we haven't always had students go through.
As a teacher, you have a set way that you think it's supposed to be, and then it doesn't turn out that way, but it was for the best. There's some confusion thinking what germination is compared to the entire life cycle of a bean. How many of your groups had something about the life cycle or the completed life cycle in your definition? Do you feel like it should be there? Nikita, what do you think about that?
I think it shouldn't be there because my bean didn't complete its life cycle, and on the day it first had its growth, it didn't complete it either.
So what day was that?
Day 3.
Which specific stage in your diagram do you think the germinating is happening?
In the second one.
In the second one. Why?
Because it started to grow its roots.
It started to grow its roots. Okay. It is the start. It's taking its first steps to grow. I'm going to take down what everybody said, And then tomorrow, I'm going to write it down on our clues chart. And you guys can let me know if you think it's good or not. Okay? How do we feel about that? Good.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. So I'll give you about 15 more seconds to see if you can challenge you to add another observation about what the students or the teacher were doing in your own list. And let's move to our collective building of the definition of sense making. And we are going to leverage two of my favorite collaboration pieces. We're going to have a digital collaborative space. And the benefit of that, even if we were face-to-face, or even if I'm a teacher in a face-to-face classroom, digital collaborative spaces allow us all to interact and share our thinking together, but also have a record of that thinking that can sustain beyond the moment and that we can go back to, which can be really important in learning. And we're also going to leverage the collaboration and the rich sharing of ideas that can come from dialogue or in the classroom science talk that is organized around some very intentional prompts that really encourage everyone's thinking. And so what we're going to do is when you go to the breakout groups, first you're just gonna briefly introduce yourself and turn on your camera and discuss with your group members your observations. And I encourage you to have somebody rise up as party coordinator and make sure that everybody has a chance to share something. And then a couple of minutes into that, you just want to do that for just a couple of minutes. As a group, you want to define what you think, based on those observations, a great definition of sense making would be. And after you define sense making, we want you to think about as a group and record what supports do you think students might need in that classroom. Like, what were the things that were in place in that third grade classroom that enabled those students to behave and think and share the way that they did? And then what kind of supports do you think need to be in place for a teacher? Like, what supports would you need to be able to lead that kind of learning in your classroom? And we're going to capture all of that, as I said, in this digital collaborative space that looks just like this document. So I'm going to ask Kate if she can share her screen real quick, and let's take a look at that. And I'm going to help you navigate the document before we all leave together. So you see at the top of the document, there are different group numbers. When we split you into a group, you're going to have at the top of your breakout group what number breakout group you are. So if you were breakout group number 2, then you're going to pick group number 2. And at the top here, you can just click there and it goes directly to your table. You can see that each table has a different colored strip at the top. This is the place there where you can just jump right in, have a recorder, and to record the thinking of the whole group once you agree. And you're going to type in your definition of sense making right there next to what is sense making. And then the recorder will move down and you see 2 other spaces to record the supports students need and the supports teachers need. If you happen to finish up before you get called out of breakout rooms, we encourage you to move down. And this serves as a sort of gallery walk and peruse the thinking of the rest of the groups. And then we truly will collaboratively build this definition. And if you don't have time to do that in this breakout room, then we encourage you after the learning today to go back in and see the beautiful thinking of your colleagues. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kate, who's going to give us a little more direction about how we get to breakout groups in Zoom.
Thanks, Trish. All right, so the first thing I need is for everybody to, oops, it says Jamboard link. That it's not the link that we want. That's why I'm like, why is nobody joining us? Because I dropped the wrong link. Here's where you really need to be. So I'm going to watch for people to join, and I just need you to hover on the Google Doc because you don't know what group you're in until you get sent to your breakout. So when I see that most of us have made it to the doc, I'm going to open all of the breakout rooms, and then you will somewhere on your screen have an invitation to join breakout. Sometimes it appears, I don't know why, behind your Zoom screen, so you might have to temporarily minimize to find the invitation. So it looks like I've got 13 of us, just a few. Let me give people just another minute to get to this document. And then once we're in breakout groups, if anybody missed the link, just let me know and I can send the link again. It looks like we've got going who's going, and as long as one person in the group can record the thinking, we're in great shape. So here we go. I'm going to open up all the rooms. And please look for your invitation to join.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for your engagement and your courage in sharing your thinking, wonderful thinking that we're collecting on this doc that Kate still has shared on her screen here. And I just wanted to take a minute to emphasize some of the things that we saw coming through in your recordings on this doc, and starting with group 1, that coming to consensus and that collaboration piece, really important in this new vision, and students getting support and how to engage equitably, and the things that need to be in place for the students to have that safe space to share and feel valued in that space is really important. And then on the other side of that, some emphasis on phenomena and questioning, which we see also pulled into group 2, a lot of conversation about questioning and some collaboration there as well. And I love in group 2 that ability to use prior knowledge to build an understanding of science. And so another way to think about that is leveraging the assets that students bring into the learning, especially when we consider the past year. Even though there was a lot of disruption to school in a lot of places around the country, or every place, but how long and how deep that was, there's a lot of differences depending on where you are in the country. But kids still had all kinds of experiences throughout that year that we can leverage to build on and accelerate the learning this year. So thank you for sharing that. And then moving down to group 3, again, we see that emphasis on science talk, discussing, and that getting to act and think like scientists do by the context of what kids are discussing, being grounded in observations and evidence. And then some mention of protocols on the student side, again, for that equitable engagement, that where kids feel really valued and when they are excited and they want to share to the group, because sharing to the group can benefit everyone, which I hope that you're starting to see some parallels, is that we as adult learners just engaged in sense making and making our thinking public, both to each other in our breakout rooms, but on this doc. So there are a lot of parallels there. And then in moving on to group 4 and 5, we see that in investigation, exploration by the students, the questioning, the collaboration, and that building of science, that the agency is on the student, like group 5 says, coming to a conclusion or a consensus individually, that it's different from the way that I experienced school, where a lot of the information that I incorporated into my thinking was shared by the teacher, but a different approach to that. And in the teacher supports, we see a lot of what the teachers have to do to make all this happen, that supporting, which is a big lift. It's just a different lift. And that's where we'll be going today as a group. How do we, if this is the vision, how do we make that happen? Or how do we begin the road to making that happen in our classroom or in the classrooms of the teachers we support? That's our goal today. So with that, Kate, if you could go back to the PowerPoint slides. And as we transition back into our story that we're building here, is now when we say, what is sense making? I'm going to encourage you to go back and ground yourself in the discussions that you just had, and ground yourself in our collective definition of sense making. A nice, I think, one-liner that builds off of what you shared is that students get to act as scientists and actively make sense of the world. That is a definition that maybe we can all agree on if we were just going to use one word to describe that. And where did all of these ideas from sense making come? And one of the big misconceptions that I hear articulated sometimes that actually causes some anxiety in teachers is that this is a new thing. And what we really want to do at this point is take a little walk down memory lane and talk about this new vision for science teaching and learning that the Colorado Science Standards are based on is actually building on the shoulders of research over many decades that has evolved and continues to evolve. And so another way to say it is this is the best research we have about how all kids learn and can have equal and rich opportunities for learning. So I want to start in the early 90s. And this is a slide that is representing the Universal Design for Learning, which is also, you may have heard the letters UDL. And the whole purpose of UDL, the basis of that research, was to minimize barriers for students. And it is curriculum writing guidance that went across all subject areas, not science specific, but all areas. So if we think about the students in our own classrooms, in our own districts, and consider when we are working to provide access to all kids, what barriers to learning do we need to eliminate, to minimize, to serve the students in your room or the students in the classrooms that you support? If you would please share your ideas in the chat window now. So let's localize this to your circumstance. What are some of the barriers to learning that students encounter in your district? So we have some shares coming in. Thank you so much. Language, second or otherwise. And I'm inferring here, but I'm guessing that you may be referring to a common discussion that we have about science learning, is that science learning, even if the student is not a multilingual learner or English is not their primary or their first language, that the language of science is very robust. And so for all students, even English speakers, that language building in science is really important in the approach to that. Reading levels can be a barrier. Scheduling, we have, again, some affirmation with literacy challenges. The background and the experiences they have, if we aren't looking at this through a diversity, equity, and inclusion approach. And for certain groups, we may be we may be setting it up to that they are starting out at a disadvantage before the learning even begins. New curriculum implementation, which a lot of districts are engaged with, can be a barrier for both teachers and students. The involvement of parents in the community. So great sharing coming into the chat here. And I encourage you to continue to share. And again, ground yourself in the things that you thought of, the students that you thought of when we think of access and those that have had barriers to that access in the past. Because as we move through the learning today, we want to think about, are the strategies that we're discussing, that we're learning about, could these remove barriers for those students? So we want to ground in our students in Colorado, and specifically in the schools and districts in which you teach. Let's think about and tease apart this universal design for learning a little bit further. So you notice here on the slide that the word universal is highlighted. And looking at the slide here, this piece of universal is just such a beautiful vision. we want to leverage the assets that each learner brings and look at them as assets. The experiences, the culture, the curiosities, the interests, and the list can continue. And so in what we're going to reflect on today is how can we do that well so that we are minimizing that this is an asset as opposed to turning into a barrier to learning for kids. And so that will be part of our discussion today. Notice that the highlighted word now is changed to learning. And I just love this slide. This slide is highlighting the research that came out of neuroscience that really allowed us to take a huge leap in what we understood about learning, because we could see into the brains of living humans that were engaged in different tasks that were associated with learning. And we could see which part of their brain was very active during that particular task. And here's what we learned. The knowledge parts of the brain, you see here pictured there and labeled as recognition. But there's a different part of the brain that is involved in skills and proficiency in those skills. And we're going to call that the how, and that you see that labeled there. And then the why, that enthusiasm for learning that can allow us to persist and to engage in the classroom. That is a deep midbrain piece that you see there labeled as caring and prioritizing. And the conclusion out of this research is that all three of these brain networks need to be engaged at all times for students to deeply engage in learning. And so we want to think about that as we move through the day, the what, the how, and the why, and how we can engage all three of these brain networks all at once in the strategies and in the high quality materials examples that we're using. And then finally, we get to the design piece. And again, just to reinforce that UDL was recommendations guidance for curriculum that was for all areas, and that in that design, we want to be designing and thinking about how we can use that asset-based approach and the three brain networks to design the instructional materials. And that is how we can provide access for all and challenges for all, so that the learning is deep in that the type of learning that can provide those next step opportunities. If we fast forward from the 90s to 2011, additional research that built on UDL, or the Universal Design for Learning, was compiled and published. And this is important because it was specific to science teaching and learning. And this research compilation is called A Framework for K-12 Science Education. And it also incorporated that neuroscience research and built on that with new learning that had happened from the 90s to 2011, but also science-specific context. And there are three main shifts that come out of this research that you will see exemplified today that are necessary to engage all of those brain networks and to leverage assets. And that is explaining phenomena, giving kids the opportunity to do science, and giving them the opportunity to learn and build understanding over time, and really to change their minds and to confront their own misconceptions. So if we pull these two things together, the framework research and the Universal Design for Learning, we see that explaining phenomena, that shift is really closely connected to that why piece, that enthusiasm for learning piece. If I'm excited, curious, if I have my own personal questions about a phenomenon or a event or process in the world, then that is more likely to engage that part of my brain network that is going to give me that enthusiasm. The doing science takes that enthusiasm and gives kids the opportunities to do both the how and the what together, integrated together. And then when we get to that third shift of that space to learn and evolve my understanding over time, all three of these pieces, the why, the how, and the what, have to be in place for kids to do that and to end up at a place of science literacy and deep understanding of science ideas. Kate, if you could move the slide forward for some reason, there we go. It came back up. Thank you. Whoops. So if we pull all of this together, and what I want you to pay attention to on this slide is the lower right-hand corner as I share that if we give students experience with a phenomena and we engage them in what we call the science and engineering practices, which is the how, and we give them the space to share their ideas and develop them and apply them over time, as we saw in the classroom video, that we're going to get to that deep understanding of science ideas, which we can term science literacy. And we're incorporating both the universal design for learning and the new research. And you see that the one in the picture in the lower right-hand corner, that is the next generation science standards document. So you could think about the Colorado science standards in that place. But this also gives us the flexibility, which we see is so important in our last year. That is, new research comes out, and what just came up was the English Learners in STEM report from 2018. New research that comes out all the time from groups like STEM Teaching Tools. And this fall, there is going to be new research out of the National Academies focused on elementary science, that as we have new research, we can incorporate that into this design for sense making. And that gives us confidence that we have a framework that can not just serve us now, but serve us into the future and be really responsive to the needs of kids and communities in science ed. So these are the 4 critical attributes of sense making that if we see them all in place and working together, that gets us to our why, which is scientific literacy for all kids. And another way to sort of put the cherry on top and give you a visual and compare it maybe to your own teaching experience, this left-hand side of the slide here, this is the way that I experienced school. My teachers had knowledge, deeper knowledge of the disciplines of science than I had, and they shared that knowledge with me. And I was one of some students that got really excited about science and performed well in science. And then I used that enthusiasm to go into a career in science. But notice that only worked for some students. And that is why we've, as an educational system, marginalized students for years, and certain groups have been more marginalized than others. The focus of this new research is that we want to provide opportunities for all students. And so what the research says is the way that we do that is by giving kids an opportunity to make sense of phenomena and to act and think as scientists and engineers. And notice that the arrows have flipped upside down. So students have the agency, and they have that role in the classroom as the knower who is building their science. And the teacher is still present, but the teacher's lift is different, that they are guiding the culture, the community, and through their questioning and a lot of the pieces that you pulled out in your Google Doc sharing, they're building that understanding up. And this is a really heavy lift. So you see the barbells there that we're gonna put on the side. And today, we really wanna focus on those supports that teachers need, and also then the supports that kids need to get to this vision of sense making.